and Tourism, Amity University, AUUP, I would like to extend a warm welcome to our guest, Professor Harold Goodwin, faculty members. See children, they're having a problem. You're on it. Welcome the students for the two-day workshop on National Tourism Policy and G20, LiFE Uniting Earth, People and Tourism. May I invite our very own Professor Dr. M. Sujnani, Dean Faculty of Hospitality and Tourism, Director, Amity Institute of Travel and Tourism, Amity University, to deliver his welcome address.
Thank you, Tina. Professor Goodwin, on behalf of our Honorable Founder President, Dr. Ashok K. Chauhan, our Honorable Chancellor, Dr. Atul K. Chauhan, our respected Vice Chancellor, Dr. Balwinder Shukla Madam, and on behalf of my entire team, students, and on my own behalf, welcome you once again to your own university, Amity University, Uttar Pradesh, Noida. I remember last time in September when you had come and we conducted a similar workshop. At that time, the agenda G20 was not in motion. It was in December 2022 that the agenda G20 was set in motion. However, Amity University, like every time, being proactive, and we knew that India is going to assume the presidency of G20, and under the leadership of our Honorable Prime Minister, Mr. Modi, how can we bring difference in the leadership of G20, which means what is missed out during the presidency of Indonesia, the last president of G20, and how can we set a trend for the coming G20 president, Brazil? We know that India has advantage of demography. We know that India has the advantage of having great leader like our Prime Minister. But our Prime Minister has rightly said that we have to draw inspiration from our old sacred texts. That is why the theme for this G20 year celebration is Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, which means we have to have the philosophy, the belief in one earth, one family, and one planet. You know, this is so easy to read out this small message of Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, but it is very difficult to implement it, to follow it. It has very deep meaning rooted in it. So in December 2022, when the India assumed the presidency of G20, there was a challenge. What are the key priority areas India shall address during its presidency period of 1 year? How can India mark a difference on the global map? Particularly during the year when we have such critical geopolitical issues. Multilateralism, Professor Goodwin. Multilateralism was a failure. We failed on two key fronts. One, we failed to meet the challenge posed by COVID-19 Multilateralism means where we fail to convince each other, where two countries or more than two countries fail to come together to look for a solution. So we failed on the one front, challenge of COVID-19. And second important front, challenge which we faced last year is that of conflict, tension between Russia and the West. So within this context of the failure of multilateralism, the world is looking up to India. World is looking up to us, you and me. How can we help the world at macro level? How can we help the world at macro level to revive this philosophy of multilateralism? How can we provide solution to issues every country is facing today, whether it is of women empowerment, whether it is of providing tech-enabled infrastructure. You know, today we are in the age where technology is shaping our life. Without technology, we today cannot imagine our life. We want to make our life so simple. Artificial intelligence is reaching to its new age. "5G is going to change our lifestyle." Imagine what happened when there was a disruption in the supply of the smart chips. You know, when we had a shortage of the supply of chips, what happened? It disrupted the whole supply chain. That's the role of technology. That's the role of artificial intelligence in our life. Today, when I drive a vehicle, I'm giving you an example. Today, when I drive a vehicle, I want a vehicle which can drive through its own, at its own. It can tell me when I am going to have a pit hole on the road, so it can drive through itself. It can sensor it, smell it, and it can, escape that pit hole. I want a vehicle which can park itself in the congested parking area. That means I want to have a life which can make my lifestyle easy and smooth. G20 agenda also addresses critical areas of climate change. When me and Professor Goodwin were coming from I block to J1 block, we were talking. And I was sharing with him that how the government of Uttar Pradesh has preponed the declaration of summer. What we used to have from 1st of April, now it is from first week of March. We never experienced an eastern disturbance in the month of March or late February, but now we are facing it. What has led to all these changes in the climate? This is purely and solely our interventions, human interventions in the cyclic processes of nature. We have disturbed the cycle of nature. Through our activities, we have disturbed it. So it is in the background of this concept and the priorities set by our government as an agenda for G20, the most important priority area at macro level is LiFE. LiFE, you can see LiFE. Life is L capital, I small, F capital, E capital. And it stands for lifestyle for future. Lifestyle for future, which means, मैं लिख के तो बहुत कुछ आया था पर उससे बोल कुछ नहीं रहा. So Goodwin, for the first time I made some script, but as usual I am not reading from here. Because this theme is and should be so close to your heart. Lifestyle for future. That means I have to change my demand and consumption pattern. Again, we were talking on this issue with Professor Goodwin. And when we got to know about the visit of Professor Harold Goodwin, that he is coming to India, he is invited by the government of Kerala, by the government of Madhya Pradesh, to share his experiences, to share about the best practices for responsible tourism with the experts who are going to assemble in one of the international conference in Kerala, organized by the government of Kerala. He is the keynote speaker there. Like every Amitian, like every true Amitian, it was my duty to request him on behalf of our Honorable Founder President, sir, our Honorable Chancellor, sir, and Vice Chancellor, madam, that if he could make small stay with Amity, share his ideas with our students, young minds, and see how can we change our lifestyle for future. How can we be more responsible to our environment? And he kindly consented. And now I proudly say he's part of Amity family, because last time in September when he visited us, we conferred upon him the honorary professorship of Amity University. So he also himself says, now I feel I am more responsible to Amity. I am more responsible to every student of Amity. And I feel like contributing in every possible way to the efforts of Amity. With these words, Professor Goodwin, it's my proud privilege to welcome you once again and express my sincere gratitude for your kind acceptance of our invite to be part of this session once again. And again, tomorrow also we'll have Professor Goodwin with us with a new theme, with a new address, because he has a habit of hitting new challenges, So today when he's talking about India's position in G20, achievements of G20 through responsible tourism, tomorrow he will talk about a different perspective altogether. So my dear students, my dear faculty colleagues, I think nothing can be better than this when you have the opportunity. Yesterday I was addressing in the next room a workshop of Amity School of Communication, and I truly accepted the fact I wish I was born in this age. And I wish I was a student of Amity. When you are exposed to such great personalities, you have the opportunity to listen to them, to learn from them. So please keep your heart, mind, ears open to accept new facts, and please practice them. Pledge to practice them. It is not just listening to them and forgetting it. No. Let's pledge to follow it. With these words, Mr. Goodwin, I leave the platform open to you. Thank you once again. A round of applause for Professor Goodwin, please. Thank you.
Hello, mic test 1 2 3. Hello.
Thank you, sir. Professor Harold Goodwin, Emeritus Professor at Manchester Metropolitan University and Senior Fellow of the Institute of Place Management, Honorary Professor, Amity Institute of Travel and Tourism, Amity University, India. Member ICRT, India Foundation, Chair of WTM, Responsible Tourism Awards, Managing Director of the Responsible Tourism Partnership and founder of the International Centers for Responsible Tourism. Dr. Harold Goodwin has worked on 4 continents with local communities, their governments, and the inbound and outbound tourism industry. He chairs the panels of judges for the World Responsible Tourism Awards and the other awards in the family of Africa, India, and Latin America. Dr. Goodwin researches on tourism, local economic development, and poverty reduction, conversations and responsible tourism, working with the industry, local communities, governments, and conversationists. He also undertakes consultancy and evaluation for companies, NGO governments, and international organizations. He's founded the ICRTD series of international conferences on responsible tourism in destinations in 2002. He co-chairs the conferences with the local host organization. He's also founder director of the International Center for the Responsible Tourism, which he founded in 2002, and which promotes the principles of the Cape Town Declaration. And he, as I said, he's also the honorary professor at Amity Institute of Travel and Tourism. Please welcome.
Hello.
I think so. Yes, sir.
One of the things I really dislike about coming to Amity, it's probably only one, it's having you do that biography, because it makes me feel exhausted and tired when I listen to people talk about what I've done in the 40 years. So next time I come, Professor, let's skip that biography, talk about the future. Because one of the things I remember when I was a student is hearing people talking about the past was sometimes a little tedious. I'm thinking, well, what about the future? What about my life? What's it going to be like for me in 40 years' time? And that's where I'd like the focus to be over the next couple of days. But unfortunately, it is true to say that the future will be what you make it, what you and the other 8 billion souls now on this planet make of the future will be what it is. When I was born, the population was about 1.5 billion. So we've been busy. We've been making lots more people. And we want everybody to have the same standard of living. But the disparities of income and living standards between different nations now are very large. And there's simply the planet is not big enough to give everyone the same standard of living. So life is going to be very difficult for the next 40 years. There's no way to avoid that. Now, yesterday I was here meeting with the Secretary of Tourism, talking about the Cape Town Declaration and what that's meant for the world since 2002. You see me there giving him a copy of the 2002 Cape Town Guidelines on Responsible Tourism. And we're developing something similar for India and for the G20. I go from here to the first global summit on responsible tourism, which is taking place in Kumarakoram over the weekend. After that, I'm going to a technology for responsible tourism symposium where we're hoping to launch a new website which will provide properly curated, reliable information for tourism businesses about which technologies actually do really make a difference. One of the things that drives me crazy is when I talk to a hotelier about solar panels, and he'll tell me, well, we tried that and it didn't work. Well, the reason it didn't work was that they were sold poor quality solar panels by a salesperson who was more concerned to make the sale than they were to increase the sustainability of the planet. And we pay a high price for that failure. We've done that. We pay a very high price for that failure to deliver technology that works, and we're still doing that. After that, I'm going to spend 2 days in Bhopal, the second most successful destination for responsible tourism. They've learned from Kerala, and they're built on the shoulders.
Hello.
Perhaps tomorrow when I come, you could make sure this is set up beforehand. This is madness, absolute madness. I'm really sorry about this. I think I'm going to carry on because we're just losing too much time. So today what I want to do is to talk about the challenge. Now, some of you will have seen this from me before, but I want to be more assertive, perhaps slightly more aggressive in what I have to say this time. Then I want to talk about where responsible tourism came from. I want to have another discussion about sustainable tourism. And then I want to look at what's happened in India and talk about the future. But the future is really the focus of tomorrow. This is laying the basis for what I'm going to have to say about tomorrow. And I should say, I think in fairness, that I'm not optimistic. I think the challenge that the world now faces, as Professor Sanjani was saying earlier, we face multiple crises around the world, and none of them are going away. They're all becoming more difficult. So, the sustainability challenge. Now, this is the bit that I find really embarrassing, and I have colleagues who say they really wish I wouldn't talk about this. But let me give you the personal perspective on 40 years of a working life. In 1972, I was about your age. I was at the University of York studying politics. And one of the programs was international politics, and I took that program. 1972 was the year that we had the first big international UN conference on environment and development. 1972. 50 years ago, half a century. Then various international strategies followed, most famously the World Conservation Strategy. And then only in 1987 did we get the Brundtland Commission and their definition of sustainability, which I think is a big part of the problem. We'll come back to that later. Then 1992, Rio, Environment and Development. Then in 2000, the Millennium Development Goals. Now, the Millennium Development Goals were successful only because India and China in particular, and a number of other developing countries, Indonesia, for example, grew very rapidly in that period. But the whole point about environment and development from 1972 was to try to grow the world's economy whilst respecting the environment. Between 2000 and 2015, when the Millennium Development Goals were so successful, we focused only on development and did very little to protect the environment. So the environment got trashed for 15 years. And then came the World Summit and the Sustainable Development Goals. And the Sustainable Development Goals are large in number because everybody wanted what they wanted to be in the Sustainable Development Goals. The reality is that they cannot be achieved. It was a myth when they were started, and they will not deliver by 2030. Now, I may live long enough to see 2030, and perhaps I'll be proved to be wrong. I really would like to be wrong. But if you look at all the trend data on what's happening around the world right now, there's no way that those sustainable development goals will be met by 2030, let alone the crazy commitment to net zero by 2050. We're simply not making progress fast enough. Now, arguably that doesn't matter to me. I'll be dead by 2050. I'm fairly confident. If I was still alive, I'd be 98, and I probably wouldn't even be able to remember my own name. So it really wouldn't matter, but it really matters to you. It has to matter to you and your children. You need to be really worried by this. So in 1972, the Limits to Growth report was published by the Club of Rome. Famous report, made a big fuss when it came out, wasn't talked about on my university course at all because universities too often don't pay attention to what's happening in the current world. They're obsessed by what their lecturers want to teach from 30 years ago when they were students. I'm sure that's not true at Amity, but at many universities it is. So no reference at all when I was at university to what was arguably the most important report to come out in 1972. Since then, there have been 4 world summits. Interestingly, there should have been a world summit last year. Didn't happen. It's a very small event, again in Sweden. We're not making progress fast enough. Now, the over-tourism, as I'm sure you're now talking about on your courses, is the example in tourism of what happens. Now, when the Limits to Growth report was published in 1972, I read it. I've still got a copy on my shelf. Not many people have got a copy, but I bought a copy. It was on the front pages of the Sunday Times. They took it seriously. It was a pity the academics didn't, but the Sunday Times did. And that's why I knew about it. Not from my faculty, but because of the journalists. And I remember reading it and thinking, that's crazy. We'll never do that. We will never make that mistake. We will do something about these long-term trends. What they were forecasting was that by 2050, the world would be completely unsustainable if they went on with business as usual. And then came the assessments, first in 2014 and then in 2020, showing that it was me that had been crazy in 1972. I thought we wouldn't do it, but we went ahead and we did it. When I say we, I mean all of us. I mean the world's population. We went ahead and we continued to consume our resources at an ever faster rate, the consequence of which is what you see now. And as the professor said just now, you've actually moved the start date of summer a month earlier because of climate change. In America right now, they have a massive heat wave and a terrible winter storm in the same country. Again, a consequence of climate change. So we look at the graph for the rate of growth in carbon emissions. And what you can see is that even COVID didn't dent it. It's gone on and on up. The situation is no better now than it was in 1972. The politicians, the leaders are still not dealing with this rapidly enough, and understandably are now distracted by issues of social and political conflict, by military conflict. The world is becoming a much more difficult place to govern. And if it becomes more difficult to govern, it becomes harder to do anything to spread resources more fairly and to look after the environment. Plastic waste wasn't much of an issue in 2000, was even less of an issue in 1972. If you've seen the film The Graduate, you'll remember one of the lead people in that saying to a young man, you need to get into plastics. It's going to be a big part of the future. I think when he talked about it being a big part of the future, he didn't mean this. The gyros of plastic, which are now in the ocean because we've put it there. The plastic pollution has given the geologists a new geological period, the Anthropocene, the geological period so dominated by human beings that we're going to leave our record in the geological time reference. So, the Brundtland Commission, mid-80s, defines sustainability. Sustainable development, they said, is development that meets the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. Nobody is going to disagree with that. The problem is that it's actually meaningless. What does that tell me about how much rare earth I can use to make mobile phones this year? What does that tell me about how much carbon I can burn this year? Tells me nothing. Produces no limits on my consumption as a human being, gives me no objective criteria by which I can tell whether I'm breaking the limits of sustainability or not. Sustainability has become a meaningless concept, a nice to have, but something that's completely impossible to operationalize. What we need to be talking about is the kind of thing that Kate Raworth is talking about in donor economics, which is how on earth do we enable people to have a decent standard of living in a world which is finite? How do potentially 10 billion people by the end of this century, how do they have a living standard as high as what you've got now? We know it's not possible on current technology, and with business as usual, that will never be achieved. We need a massive change in the way in which we deliver a decent life for ourselves. Now, when I was a student, and I was a student of politics, not of tourism, but the assumption back then was that tourism was a green industry. It's a non-polluting industry. And that myth survived well into the 1980s. If you look back in the textbooks, that will tell you it's a clean route to development. And then we began to see the reality of it. Greenhouse gas emissions, litter, trampling, the cost of cleaning up after tourists, the use of the public realm for free, the global commons, the congestion, the terrible social and economic impacts on the high streets and in villages. I think of Labuan Bajo, for example, in Indonesia, where I did work on the Komodo dragon, where peasant farmers were pushed off their sites, fishermen moved, sold out because the developers wanted to put hotels there. They lost their incomes. They didn't necessarily get employment in the hotels. Tourism isn't always a good thing. It can do really serious damage. The growth of second homes and holiday lets and the induced effects of migration. In North Wales, they really dislike the English for moving in when they're retired, increasing the costs on the health service in Wales when they made no contribution during their working lives. There are lots and lots of conflicts which are arising now because of tourism and its polluting effects across the economic, social, and environmental pillars. I think Sir Colin Marshall probably regrets saying this. I don't suppose he wrote it. It was in a press release written for him. But when BA launched the Tourism for Tomorrow Awards in 1994, he let the cat out of the bag. He said that tourism and the travel industry is essentially the renting out for short-term lets of other people's environments. When BA used to make profits, which was some time ago, but when it did used to make profits, It was making profits out of people who were coming to India to come on holiday. It was making profits at the expense of India or America. The profits accrue largely in travel and tourism to the big businesses, accrues to some small businesses, but very largely to the bigger ones. It does create some employment, but the big beneficiaries of travel and tourism are the big corporates. Look at the membership of the World Travel and Tourism Council. It's the hotel franchise companies, it's the car hire companies, it's the very large successful tour operators, and it's the airlines. Those are the members of the WTTC. These are the businesses who've been most successful out of travel and tourism. And Sir Colin Marshall, then chair of British Airways back in 1994, said this on the public record. Now, what academics have to face, the faculty, is that as far as I know, I'm still the only academic who uses this quotation in my work. And yet it is so revealing of the way the industry works. But most academics don't use it. The other thing which I think is fundamentally true is that one of the reasons I come to India and would still come as a tourist if I ever had a holiday, I don't very often, is because I want to see the way other people lead their lives in other parts of the world. It's your everyday life, particularly in the villages and in the rural areas, but also in the cities and in the temples and so on, that one sees another way of life. And that's interesting. Sometimes we learn things from those experiences. But what we learn is determined by the way we travel and by the people we meet, by the people who guide us, who tell us the stories, who tell us about Hinduism in India. And I can tell you from experience that it's very easy to spend time traveling in India and learn nothing about Hinduism. One of the things I hope the G20 leadership from India will do is to make much more of the world aware of the difference between the fundamental tenets of the Hindu philosophy and those of the monotheistic religions, which are large and, in my view, significant. Tourism Concern years ago ran a campaign called Our Holidays in Their Homes. We take our holidays in your homes. Thank you very much for providing them for us. Tourism is unusual, it's very unusual in that we have to travel to the factory to consume the product. The product is India, we have to travel to India to consume that product. The problem is that the way we consume it makes a difference to the people we're visiting. In theory, we're much closer to the producers and the workers. We ought to be more concerned about what they're being paid and what their conditions of employment are. But we feel entitled as tourists, so we don't take any notice. Just carry on. There are, however, opportunities for additional sales of goods and services to tourists. They are bringing money to communities, and we need to find ways, and much of my practical work has been focused on pro-poor tourism and working out how communities can make more from tourism. Now, I'm often asked, why did I get involved in responsible tourism? Well, this is why. I was in the 80s working in adult education, which was a vocation rather than a well-paid job. And the only way I could travel around the world was by recruiting a group of students who would come on a tour that I organized and I would lead. So I found myself in the 1980s going to some absolutely fantastic destinations, cultural and natural heritage attractions, including, for example, Bharatpur in India, in Rajasthan, the Keoladio Bird Reserve. It's one of the great reserves of the world. And most of the people who were there were European or American travelers. There were very few domestic travelers there at that time. It's changed. At the time, there were very few domestic. It was mostly international. And when we did research there, years later, we found that my fear was well-grounded, which was that the tourist was not paying enough even to cover the costs of managing their presence in the reserve. They're simply not paying enough. Effectively, every visit to that reserve was being subsidized by the taxpayers of India. I was infuriated by that ecotourism slogan about leaving nothing but footprints. No idea that you might leave behind some money or benefit the local community in any way. Which brought us back to the problem of sustainability. One of the things I put it in red that really is a real litmus test of whether somebody understands. If people talk about sustainable and responsible tourism, they don't understand. And you see that phrasing more and more frequently in government policy statements, in textbooks and so on. Sustainability is too abstract, too general, we can't define it. And I'm not saying that anybody has failed in defining it, because I haven't defined it either. It is one of those concepts that cannot be defined. It is a concept beyond definition. The truth is that we engage as consumers of tourism on particular issues. To take a very successful of a campaign on that. The campaign to discourage people from riding on elephants was very quickly very successful, because people did not want to feel guilty about the experience they'd had of riding on elephant back. Now, I've been on elephant back twice in India, once at a temple in Rajasthan, once in Kanha, in the Tiger Reserve. I didn't know when I did that how dangerous and damaging that was for elephants, but I do know now. And so do a lot of those tourists who've been told time and time again by animal welfare charities not to do it. We can change people's behavior by making them aware of the negative impacts. We have to work on the things which are relevant locally. It's no good trying to get people to address issues that they don't see as an issue. So my sister, who lives in North Wales, about 250 miles from where I live, has a big problem with water. They have too much of it. The problem there is flooding. I live in East Kent, where we have a problem with water. We have drought every year. It makes no sense for a hotel in North Wales to reduce its water consumption. It's not worth investing in that. Water supply is not an issue. It would be wrong for any hotel in East Kent not to worry about its water consumption. So the issues vary from place to place. And groups like the Global Sustainable Tourism Council don't recognize that. They think there's one set of priorities everywhere. That's not true. The only two global issues are carbon emissions and plastic. Everything else is a local issue. It might be a local issue that occurs in lots of places, but it is a local issue. It doesn't matter everywhere. I've already said too little progress. So what's responsible tourism? It's easily said that it's about making better places for people to live in. That is the first and most important objective. Tourism is like a fire. As you hear this a lot further east in Southeast Asia. People will say tourism is like a fire. You can use it to cook your food on it, or if you don't control it, it will burn your house down. We all know that we need to control fire, and tourism is like a fire. What we need to do is to use tourism rather than to be used by it. Now, the primary responsibility for determining how tourism will be used in any community must reside with that community. It's not the responsibility of the tour operator. It's not the responsibility of the hotelier. It's not the responsibility of the tourism marketeers. It's the responsibility of the government that manages that space, that place, on behalf of the community who elect it. So it's really fundamentally a government issue. One of the reasons that tourism has been well managed now in Kerala and increasingly well managed in Madhya Pradesh is because of the strength of local government in those states and the relationship between the local governments, the panchayat, and the state government. Unfortunately, that's not common around the world. So what is it? It's about tourism management. social, economic, environmental. It's a way of traveling. It does offer a better experience if you travel responsibly. It's a movement. It recognizes and celebrates diversity. If you're responsible, you don't assume that the way you walk into a temple or a mosque or a cathedral is the same. Those engagements with the spiritual traditions of the world will be different depending on the religious and the social cultural context in which it takes place. In some cultures, it's acceptable for a non-believer to enter a mosque. In others, it is not. And that is a function of the culture and the spiritual traditions of particular peoples in particular places. And personally, I like the world that way. I don't want to see the world become one homogeneous place. I like that diversity. We should celebrate it. The fundamental to responsibility is the notion of transparency. I'm talking about the negative impacts that your lifestyle has and the positive impacts that you can have. If we're ever going to become sustainable on this planet, and my generation has failed in this, your generation can't afford to. Your generation has to achieve sustainability. There isn't another chance. If we're ever going to achieve it, we have to accept the responsibility and we have to be willing to take the action necessary to achieve sustainability. So why the word responsibility? My guess is that everyone in the room has had conflicts with their parents about whether their behavior is responsible or not. I can still remember the arguments I used to have with my parents about whether I was being responsible or not. And those of you who become parents are going to go through that again, because you'll go through those conflicts with your children in the same way that your parents went through them with you. So one of the most interesting things about the concept of responsibility is most of us have two intensive periods of study in interaction with our parents about what responsibility means. But it certainly requires that we change our behavior. Nearly every conflict you have with your parents about responsibility is about your behavior. It's about whether you're going to do the dishes. It's about what time you're coming home from seeing your friends. It's all about your actions. It's about what you do. And if we're ever going to create change, we have to get people to take responsibility. Now, one of the things that worries me is when you see people trying to make money by owning the concept of responsibility, by trademarking sustainable tourism and using it for commercial advantage. Responsible tourism is not a product. It's what we should expect every kind of tourism product to be. It's not a market niche. We should demand that every kind of tourism becomes more responsible. And it is beginning to happen. It's not hopeless. We are seeing destinations being more worried now about the yield, the value of tourism to the community, rather than just the number of arrivals. We are seeing quite a lot. We see it in responsible tourism news now every month. There are examples of destinations who are deliberately changing the kinds of tourists that they attract. So they're attracting tourists who will spend more money and do less damage to the environment and the culture in the destination they're coming to. The Minister of Tourism from Goa recently come out really strongly saying they want to change the way tourists operate. Kerala achieved that back in 2009 when they cancelled the last charter flight from Britain, bringing cheap tourists to the beaches of Kerala. Kerala has transformed itself. One of the first places in the world to do that. And it's one of the reasons that responsible tourism has been so successful. But we have a very big problem with greenwashing. People are beginning to use these words without any content. What we need to do is to make sure that those people who are greenwashing get called out, that the travelers are knowledgeable enough to spot greenwash when they see it, and to object, to demand compensation, to want their money back. So why responsible? Simply put, it's about accountability and responding to the challenge to make the world a better place. What you can't afford to do is to keep saying we'll leave it to somebody else. It was Abraham Lincoln who said, "You cannot escape the responsibility of tomorrow by evading it today." Now, actually, that's not completely true, because I can escape the responsibility of tomorrow because I'm pretty confident I'll be dead relatively soon. You can't. Most of you in this room will still be alive in 20, 30, 40 years, by which time the inactivity of now will be coming back to haunt you, and it will certainly be haunting your children. So responsible tourism started with a man called Jost Krippendorf. If you haven't read Jost Krippendorf's The Holiday Makers, you need to read it. It's a difficult read. Most undergraduate students find it too difficult. Master's students, in my view, ought not to be allowed to graduate without having read it. I reread it every couple of years. It's a really rich seam of understanding about the changes which are occurring in what the consumers want and the way that relates to tourism. Jost Krippendorf was the first man to talk about tourism as an extractive industry, an industry that destroys the places it travels to. This is actually the graphic that I used in my presentation at the Cape Town conference in 2002, where the Cape Town Declaration was promoted and agreed by a conference of 200 people. And it actually said on that slide that you cannot outsource responsibility. You can't leave it to others. It's responsibility, it's yours. We all tried as children in those conflicts with our parents to blame somebody else, blame our brother or our sister or the friend down the street or the uncle. It's always somebody else's fault. Sorry, God, not me. I didn't take that last cake. I didn't eat that last piece of chocolate. It was somebody else. We've all tried that. Shouldn't be allowed to get away with it. You cannot outsource it. It's your responsibility. And one of the things we need to be really careful of is this problem that if it's everybody's responsibility, it can very quickly become nobody's. And that's where we still are. We all want to leave it to others, solve the problem. What I would say, and this is a really serious point to which I'll return tomorrow, it is not primarily the responsibility of the traveller or the holidaymaker to make their holiday sustainable. I don't have a choice about how I fly to India. I have lots of choices about different companies, but every aircraft I might fly to India on will be burning kerosene and pumping carbon emissions into the atmosphere. There is no choice. There is a choice, and it will come. We will have hydrogen-powered aircraft by 2035. But how quickly those hydrogen-powered aircraft become the dominant form, we have to wait and see. But we need a step change in aviation to move from kerosene to hydrogen. We've just seen the first hydrogen-powered trains operating in China. They exist already. There are electric aircraft going to be flying commercially this year. But the jets which travel longer haul are going to take a bit longer. We're reliant on the hydrogen. But when the hydrogen comes, there needs to be a very rapid transition. Now, one of the things that I like about coming to Delhi is that you see the success of what's happened with the tuk-tuks and the taxis, and that transition to cleaner forms of fuel in the cars and the tuk-tuks and in the taxis. It's made an enormous difference to air quality in Delhi. You still have a problem. The problem is a lot less bad than it was when I used to come 20 years ago. Problem's still here, but at least you're making progress. But that's one of the reasons I like to come here, Professor, is that actually it makes me feel a bit more cheerful that there are places in the world where some of these major issues are being successfully tackled. So what are the differences between sustainable tourism and responsible tourism? They're definitely not the same thing. Sustainability, sustainable tourism, entirely abstract. It's a long-term goal. Responsible tourism is about what you do. And you will never achieve sustainability without people taking responsibility. It is responsibility that drives sustainability. Sustainability is the aspiration. Responsibility is what you need to do, what you need to take, what you need to grasp and use to make sustainability happen. It's that sense of having a duty or an aspiration to do something about it. And actually, it can make you feel good. You take responsibility and pick up litter. If you plant trees, these things are good things to do as human beings. And it's nice to escape the blame. Now, one of the big trends that's advantaged us in this movement towards sustainability is that the market is also interested in this. We're moving into the period of the experience economy, and that's driving increased tourism. And what tourists want is to create memories, quality, meaningful memories of their holidays. And that can only be done when it's co-created between the tourist and the people in the destination. And that's what leads to the viral marketing. India's image, or the image of parts of India around the world, is changing very rapidly. I don't know if you know this, but Kerala has come up in the top 52 places in the world to visit in the New York Times. Not anywhere else in India. Not the place of the Red Fort, not Khajuraho, not the Kana Nature Reserve, but Kerala. Now, if you told me that was going to happen 20 years ago, I'd probably have laughed. And I'd had the privilege that I'd been to Khajuraho and the Red Fort and the Taj Mahal 20 years ago. Now, I wouldn't bother to go, because they've been spoiled almost irretrievably by over-tourism. And you see then the success of Kerala, which changed its tourism model and has now been accepted. You can, as Justin Francis, he was one of my students, he went on to create responsibletravel.com, which just before COVID was growing at 60% a year. Not many tourist businesses that were doing that. And he was doing it because the tourists who found a product on responsibletravel.com came back to look for similar products. So responsible tourism is commercially successful. It's not the reason you do it. You do it because it's the right thing to do. You do it because it minimizes risk for your business. You're not going to suddenly find the regulations change, make life difficult. It makes a much better relationship for you with your community. If you don't have a receptive community around your hotel, the tourists don't go out from your hotel. They don't stay long because they don't find being in the hotel very entertaining. It affects product quality. You can save costs. Importantly, you get good staff morale, which means you get good retention of your staffing. You don't have to do so much retraining, and there are market advantages. There is a strong business case, except it's not one case. It's not a singular thing. There are business cases. We need to remember that when we talk about why responsible tourism works. It partly works as well because it feeds into this broader consumer trend of people wanting authenticity. This experience economy where the real is valued more than the fake, where money and time, the currency of experience, mean that people want to have an experience. They have shorter holidays. I was briefly a tour operator in the early 90s. We used to sell 3-week holidays. Almost no 3-week holidays at all are sold anymore. That's because the work environment has changed and people don't get such long holidays. And many people have never had those kinds of long holidays. Now they're much shorter, more intense experiences where people want to get more out of their few days away. So what happened in Kerala? Kerala committed to responsible tourism in 2007, and I began to work with them to bring the second international conference to Kerala, which happened in March 2008. There was actually a demonstration against that conference by communities who were concerned that this was just another way of spreading tourism into communities who would not benefit from the tourism, but would be used by tourism. They'd be used, they wouldn't benefit. And that was the concern that many communities in Kerala and many of the NGOs had in 2008. What happened in 2008 at the conference was that we gathered together all the experience there was from around the world about how you could make tourism more responsible. And that resulted in the Kerala Declaration, which is really a piece of international learning about what would make tourism more sustainable, what would make it more responsible. That was published, it's still available. There's a link on my website and in other places to it. What happened then was that they began to address what were then the major issues of the major negative impacts of tourism in communities in Kerala. Over-tourism was one of them. The second was litter and waste, particularly in the backwaters where rubbish was being dumped into the lakes. And perhaps most important of all, the exclusion of the local communities who were not benefiting from tourism. They were being used, they weren't benefiting. So immediately after the conference, for 2 years, between 2008 and 2010, they had 4 experiments. 4 different villages, 4 experiments. Only one of the experiments worked, and that was the one at Kumarakoram. Now, it's really unusual for governments to have those kinds of experiments. Sadly, somebody has a bright idea and suddenly everybody's going to try the same thing. And then when it doesn't work, they're surprised. It was extremely foresighted of Kerala to have 4 different experiments and find out what worked. And what worked was to create producer groups. These are groups of small producers who together could produce in enough volume to be able to meet the needs of the hotels and the resorts for vegetables and meat and so on, fish. They created village life experiences, which were experiences designed for tourists who could have a series of 6 different experiences in the morning with a guide going to visit different parts of the rural economy in the villages adjacent to where they were staying. And the tourists knew that those people they were visiting were receiving a payment for the visit. They didn't feel that you had to buy a piece of craft. And they also understood that it was important that the hotels, the resorts, the tour operators could sell these village life experiences. So they were all commissionable, which meant that they fitted very well into the tourism industry model. And the third principle was that you avoided dependency. You didn't make households dependent on tourism. So that was then rolled out. And we were challenged by the minister who said, okay, so this looks like a good idea, but can you prove it works? So we did a census in 2015 in Kumarakoram. People from the local community went and interviewed nearly every household to see what they now thought about tourism. And what you can see from these figures is that people had gone from thinking that tourism was entirely a bad thing to largely thinking that it was a good thing, because the tourists were benefiting individual households. But the most important thing, that was important, but the most important thing was this. For most households, it was an additional livelihood. It wasn't their only source of income. So when in COVID, tourism turned right down, people were not left with no livelihood. They were left with less, but not with nothing, because at the household level, they were not dependent on tourism. That's a really important piece of learning, because you cannot assume that tourism will be there every year. Sometimes it gets disrupted by political instability or by epidemics or by economic crisis. All of these things can reduce tourism. 2017, the Responsible Tourism Mission was set up in Kerala, largely because the minister was convinced by the research that we'd done in Kumarakoram, and now responsible tourism is being developed across the whole state. It is an incredible thing to see happen. hence the global summit taking place this weekend in Kerala. And it happens with some great ideas. Village Life, Experience Kerala, Touch the Goodness Within, Better Together. These are great ways of describing what this is, but it is ultimately about the relationship between the tourist and the community and the experiences that you can have. Look at the pleasure on that tourist's face, learning to pot alongside a local potter. Kerala has also been, Rupesh Kumar in particular, has been very determined to write up their experience as they go. So if you're interested in how to do these things in villages, the publications which they've produced really help you to do this. I particularly recommend PEPA, which is an acronym that stands for People's Participatory Planning and Empowerment Through Responsible Tourism. It's a mouthful, but it's a really useful guide to how to do this kind of tourism in villages. It's a globally unique approach to tourism at the kind of scale that it is. And one of the things that they've done, which I think is really important to keep reminding people, is every village does something slightly different. They're not setting villages up in competition with each other. They're setting up a very rich diversity of experiences. Most recently, they've done Street, which is sustainable, tangible, responsible, experiential, ethnic tourism. And these are hubs in particular villages. We gave them the Global Award this year for that work. And essentially, they've taken a village and created, I think, a dozen different tourist experiences that you can have in different streets in that village. So they've really worked on continuous innovation and making the place more exciting for more tourists to come to, and extending lengths of stay so that people don't just come for an afternoon, but come and stay and have these different experiences. This year's awards are still open for India. I would like to encourage you, if you know of businesses or destinations you think should apply, please encourage them. It's very important that people apply for the awards and are recognized. It's one of the ways that they differentiate themselves. Now, if we come to the future, we passed last year the 20th anniversary of the Cape Town Declaration and the Guidelines for Responsible Tourism, which I gave a copy of to the Secretary of Tourism yesterday. We've set up a platform for change, which we're still working on the Responsible Tourism Partnership website, accepting that we're now in the critical decade for change. What I would say to you is, stop worrying about what people are saying, start worrying about what they're doing. Never mind the patter, watch the hands. There is so much greenwashing out there now that you have to have your bullshit detector really well tuned to spot the people who are just using the language and not doing anything. Responsible tourism is spreading across India quite rapidly. There are a number of other states now coming in behind Kerala or joining Kerala and Madhya Pradesh. One of the things I was asked last time I was here, after I'd been here, Professor, was why did I think responsible tourism has been so successful in Kerala? And I began to think about this, and one of the reasons I think is that the two leading destinations for responsible tourism in the world are Barcelona on the Mediterranean coast and Kerala, which is on the shores of the Arabian Sea. So one of the characteristics they have in common is that they're outward facing. They're on the coasts. It makes a big difference to the psychology of people who live in those areas. That's the first thing. But more important than that, I think, is that they both had rebellious locals. They both had demonstrations against tourism. More seriously, perhaps in Kerala, more seriously, perhaps in Barcelona than in Kerala, but nonetheless, both have had dissatisfied groups of local residents, rebellious locals, as Krippendorf called them, who've demanded change from their politicians. But of course, you can only demand change of politicians and only make a difference if the politicians respond. And as it happens, both Barcelona and Kerala a very strong local democratic institutions, which I think is a really important part of why it's worked in those two places, and also why it's working in Madhya Pradesh. They're also characterized by transparency. You can tell who's doing something and who isn't. That's a big counter to greenwashing. And those of you who are going to work in hotels or in tour operating, you need to recognize a big part of the consumers that you're going to be handling have done ecology or environmental studies at university. They know what an aerated shower is. They know what an LED light is like. I had no idea of that when I started traveling, but now those consumers do, and they're going to not like it when they go to a hotel that doesn't have LED lights, isn't using aerated showers. They are going to object. The other big change I think is happening is that marketing and management are for the first time being combined in tourism. Now, if you work in a proper industry, like aviation or car manufacture, the marketeers design the products, and they do it by looking at what the technology can offer and what the consumer demand is for. In tourism, marketing is generally nothing more than promotion. Marketing is misused in tourism. It means often nothing more than producing a brochure. It doesn't mean what it ought to mean, which is how do I get the right kind of tourist to come to my place? How do I find that consumer segment which I want for my place? That's the challenge. Madhya Pradesh has had a very strong emphasis. I'm nearly finished, you'll be pleased to hear. It's a very strong emphasis on empowering communities, ensuring that the communities benefit, the locals benefit, and that the tourists are aware of the heritage, culture, and the customs of the places they're visiting in order to make the meaningful connections that we talk about, reversing the negative effects of travel and empowering local communities. They've focused on 6 things in Madhya Pradesh: homestays, rural tourism, responsible souvenir production, safe tourism destinations for women. That's been transformatory for those women who've been involved in it in Madhya Pradesh. The solid waste management and wastewater management, and then a lot of work on people who are differently able. So you can find much more information about this on my YouTube channel, Responsible Tourism Partnership YouTube channel. You'll find lots of links, and I'll leave this presentation with you for you to follow up on the links. Tomorrow, I want to be talking about India's global leadership in responsible tourism through the G20, and what's likely to happen this coming year, the consequences I hope that will have for tourism around the world. Thank you for listening, those of you who have been. Thank you.
Any questions?
One of the things I really admire about contemporary students is that you now have developed the ability to remember the content of lectures without taking any notes. I'm really impressed by this. You know, I wish that when I was a student, I wish I'd been able to do that. Unfortunately, that was a skill I never learnt, but I'm impressed. So many of you just sat through an hour-long lecture and didn't take a single note. It's really impressive that you can do that. I take my hat off to you. I think it's really a remarkable achievement that you're so intellectually on the ball, that you can sit through an hour's lecture and take no notes. I'm really impressed. Did you say there was a question?
What is the difference between traditional tourism and responsible tourism?
Well, traditional tourism is completely unsustainable. It's exploitative. You have it, if you go to Delhi, you see traditional tourism all over the place. Go to the Red Fort. Go and see what happens at Kunta Majur. mean, it's just, that is the traditional form of tourism is completely unsustainable. And what you see now is destinations. I just noticed today, Thailand is introducing a tourism tax. Somewhere else, I've forgotten where, but a major port is introducing a tax on tourist arrivals. We're seeing communities now saying we don't want the volume of tourists. They're still talking in Venice about introducing a minimum payment to get onto the old island of central Venice. We are beginning to see traditional tourism completely change. But what your generation has done, and I'm sorry to say it, but your mobile phones have made you very keen on the trophy photograph. So you can go to Venice and you'll see everybody just taking a photograph of themselves in the main square. I don't even know whether they're there. They've obviously not yet learned to use Photoshop because they don't actually need to be there to get that photograph. It'd be a lot cheaper just to use Photoshop. But traditional tourism is exploitative. It's completely unsustainable. Well, if it was, you know, and in the few places where it is, if you look at the cultural thing, what happens in Kerala, and it is not only in Kerala, it's in Madhya Pradesh as well, and it's in lots of places in India, but not at scale, is that the tourist comes along to learn about that culture and that heritage, to learn about how to cook the food, how to make Keralan dishes. I've watched some of the decoration of the temples take place in Kerala. You see that engagement, that positive enjoyment of the local culture, of the music, along with the local people. Now that protects it because it values that cultural heritage. And one of the things we know is that young people are more likely to stay in villages where they see their culture being valued. Now, on the wildlife side, it's much less, I'm less optimistic on the wildlife side. We see some progress in stopping people wanting to have selfies with tigers and with monkeys and not willing to ride anymore on the backs of elephants, which is perhaps good for them, for them. But if you look at the practice in national parks, we still have people crowding in. You know, the guides will use the radio to say, I've just seen a tiger, and before you know it, there's 25 vehicles surrounding that tiger. And that obviously has an impact on the natural life of the tiger, on their ability to breed and to feed themselves, because they need to hunt and they can't hunt when they're surrounded by vehicles. So the responsible operators are no longer doing that, but very few operators can withstand the tipping pressure from the tourist who really wants to get close to see a tiger. One of the worst experiences I had as a tour leader was I was at Kana, and we'd programmed to be there for 3 days because we knew it was difficult to see a tiger. So we were there for 3 days. We're going to go out twice a day for 3 days to look for a tiger. The first morning when we went out, we saw a tiger. This is a disaster because now the tourists just want to see a tiger feeding and a tiger with cubs, because their expectation now is it's easy to see a tiger. Now I want to see more intimately. I want to see the tiger. So this management of the expectation of the tourist and what they should see. If you really want to see a tiger, watch a wildlife documentary. You're much more likely to see the tiger that way than you are if you go out into a reserve. So I'm pessimistic on the tiger, on the wildlife side. I'm more optimistic on the cultural side. But it's really a matter of what the people who manage those experiences do. Thanks for the question.
Sir, has this guideline of responsible tourism filtered down to the hotel industry? Because when we see sustainable practices in case of hotels, so we always find the word sustainable practices. But in the word responsible tourism, I think it's somewhere. Let's say I do not find that it's not that kind of industry. Certification is given for sustainable action. So as we trickle down to the hotel industry and
I mean, obviously the world's a big place and it has trickled down in some hotels. The problem, you've asked the question, so you better have the answer. The problem with sustainability and the hotels is that they rely on certificates to make their claim for being sustainable. The certificate is given by an independent body, which has been paid to send an inspector to look at the hotel and say whether it's sustainable or not. Most hotels don't then do anything to inform the guest of what they're doing to make the hotel more sustainable, what they're doing to take responsibility for making the hotel more sustainable. Now, there are honorable exceptions. The Orchid Eco Hotel at Mumbai Airport is one. I'm staying at the Lemon Tree Hotel here in Delhi, the airport hotel. Interestingly, they explain in my bathroom, it's a big notice. It says you'll notice that the water that flushes your toilet looks a bit grey. Looks grey because it's actually recycled water. It's water that is not potable, can't drink it, but they've caught the already used water, they've cleaned it a bit, they've put it back into a second system to flush the toilets with. That massively reduces the amount of water that that hotel is using. But the reality is that most certificated hotels are not actually practicing sustainability. So I was booked into a hotel in Morocco, which was a 3-star sustainable hotel. Very nice hotel. I go to my room, I open the door, and I'm hit by the cold air coming out of the room because the temperature in the room has been set at 15 degrees. All the lights are on in the room and the TV is telling me who I am. Now, it is true that I'm over 70, but I do still remember my name. I don't need to be reminded of my name. Yeah, that. Maybe next year I will need to be told what my name is, but right now I know. So that's a bit insulting. I don't need to be told. But all the lights are on, air conditioning at 15 degrees. So it's 34 degrees outside. So this is obviously designed to give me pneumonia. So I turn the temperature up to 24 degrees, turn all the lights out, go out to have dinner. Come back, guess what? Temperature's down at 15 degrees and all the lights are on in the room and it's still telling me what my name is on the TV screen. Somebody's come in and put it all back. Now that's a 3-star sustainable hotel. What a joke. Now, most people have now had that experience. Also had the experience checking into a hotel, being given 2 key cards. And I say, why do I need 2 key cards? Am I sharing? I thought I booked a single room. Am I going to share? Do you think I want a prostitute? Is that why I've got another key card? So as I can invite a prostitute up to my room? And the woman behind the desk just looks completely nonplussed. Everybody gets 2 key cards. Says I can put one in the little slot on the wall, says I can leave the lights and the air conditioning on while I go down for dinner. This is a joke. But certified hotels are doing that all over the world. So I'm afraid that, you know, the certification issue is a serious issue for the travel and tourism industry because so many people are certified but then break the rules. Very simple rules that people recognize. So now I don't take much notice whether a hotel's got a certification or not. I'm much more likely to look at booking.com, which I think is one of the things I'll talk about tomorrow, I hope, is booking.com, because one of the things they're doing now is encouraging their business partners to actually say on the website what it is that they're doing. Now, that means that if they don't deliver that when I'm there as a guest, I can demand compensation because I've been missold that product. That's a big change. With a green certificate, I can't get any money back for being missold because they'll say, well, I didn't tell you that. That was the certification agency. And I don't have a contract with the certification agency, so it's the safest form of greenwashing there is. It's very depressing. But it is changing, and I think what booking.com will completely change that that landscape. It's a really progressive thing that they've changed it. Please.
My question is, how responsibility can awareness and promote ethics in knowledge?
Well, I've spent most of my life as an educator. We've made some progress, but not enough. And it's interesting looking around the room now, quite a lot of the people in the room, Professor Sanjani, just look really bored. They can't wait for it to be lunchtime. The reality is that everybody has to take responsibility for encouraging others to understand what is necessary to take responsibility. Now, some government leaders are doing that. Your own Prime Minister, I think, is a stunning example of a global leader who is making that case and doing things about it. But too many politicians, too many, frankly, too many faculty in universities are not playing their role. I just hope that your generation takes that responsibility to share the message. And one of the things your generation has that mine didn't have is that opportunity for user-generated content. You know, that ability to post on Facebook saying, this hotel claims to be sustainable. It's got a 3-star sustainability certificate from whichever certification agency it is. And I went into my hotel room and the temperature was at 15 degrees. The lights were on. It was telling me my temperature, telling me my name on the TV screen. When I was your age, that technology did not exist. Now it does. And I think that user-generated comment, that blowing the whistle on social media is a really important thing that can now happen that couldn't happen back in 1972 when I was your age. To call it out, embarrass people. You know, just to end on a more positive note, perhaps, when I talk now with board directors of travel and tourism companies, they'll often tell me that their grandchild, because that's the age of these people, their grandchild has explained to them about waste recycling. Because that next generation has a much more acute awareness. But your generation needs to have that acute awareness too, and be pushing hard, particularly when you get your first employment, push for sustainability. Because if you don't do it, the world will become unsustainable and frankly uninhabitable in any comfortable way for your children.
Can we have some kind of like for example, if I have a 10 pointer on one thing, it can give it everyone like
You can, Professor, the good news is that I will give that to you tomorrow. It already exists. And it's been signed up to, as I'll show you tomorrow, it's been signed by the CEO of the Sustainable Hospitality Alliance, which represents over 40% of all the hotel beds in the world. That doesn't necessarily mean that all those hotels are following the practice, but it does mean that their NGO has signed up to the Global Charter on Responsible Tourism, and I'll talk about that tomorrow. That happened in November last year. I think it partly depends how successful your current political leaders are in changing the culture and the practices of the professions in India. We do know, if you take the Eco Hotel, for example, in Mumbai, That was built 20 years ago. It cools its central atrium with water, has a waterfall that drops right through the central atrium and brings the water temperature, the air temperature down. Now, okay, you have to pump the water up, but it's a lot less than running air conditioning. We do know how to do these things. The question is whether we do them. And that's really the big challenge. It's about getting people to change the way the product is constructed. It will never be achieved just by getting consumers to change their practices. As I was saying, I cannot buy a low impact flight to India. Every airline that flies to India burns kerosene. I can't wait for that to change. But the responsibility is really on the producers to change it. It's the producer's responsibility. Sorry, the gentleman here.
So the importance of responsible tourism is very clearly evident in the present time. So in a country like India, I as a student and the academics, they are aware of this responsible tourism. But in our country, how do you market to change the trend? Where you shift the trend from the traditional tourism to responsible tourism? Why an average person will strive, will want to go towards the responsible tourism where they have the option of the traditional tourism? How do you change this trend?
Okay, that at last is an easy question to answer. I think the answer is that you just make it a better experience. That's why Kerala has been so successful. Why has Kerala managed to change its tourism? Because it's created great experiences, which are great experiences because it's a more responsible connection, a more meaningful connection between the host and the guest. They've turned what used to be an exploitative relationship into a much less exploitative, more equal relationship. So one of the things that happens in India, which I think is a shame, is that people don't give the guides enough credit, because really a good guide is like a good university lecturer. A good university lecturer can open your eyes to see the world in a different way, and a good tour guide can do the same thing. But to get really good tour guides, you need to train them and pay them better. But the quality of the experience you have, if you do a village life experience with a guide who's been trained to do that with a particular community, is a completely different experience to walking around the Red Fort with somebody who's just telling you how old that particular stone is. And tourists are wanting those authentic exchanges with local communities. So it's about producing a better experience. And that's why responsibletravel.com has been so successful as a business, and why companies like the Travel Corporation with the Tread Right Foundation and TUI are all making this transition, and they're being successful because they're doing that. It's good for profits, it's good for their bottom line, it's good for their employees, it's good for the environment, and it's good for the communities they operate. It is in the end a more successful model. The question is whether we can get there fast enough to avoid the damage that is still being done. That's the question. Let me finish by saying I went to Khajuraho. I've been to Khajuraho probably 10 times, went a lot when I was tour leading. I was there in September after I've been here. I have to tell you, it's a much better experience now than it was 10 years ago. It has more visitors, but it's a better managed site than it was 10 years ago. So it's not hopeless, but it does need people to take responsibility and change the way places are managed to make them more sustainable, to make them better experiences for the tourists. So when I came here with my wife, she wouldn't go to the Taj Mahal. We were staying 2 hours drive away. She said, "Nah, I don't want to go there. It's been spoiled by tourism." So we went to the D Palaces, which are also nearby. And that was a wonderful experience. We were the only European tourists there. But now I would take my wife to Khajuraho. I'd say a lot of people do go there, but it's still a good experience. I wasn't able to persuade her to go and see the Taj. That's me trying to persuade my own wife. So you can imagine the difficulties of these things. The Taj is well recognized around the world as a place which has been substantially spoilt by tourism. And I accept that they are trying to change that. The problem is a reputation takes a while to change the reputation of a place. And I wish the Taj people well in doing it, but it will be a struggle, given that so many people want to visit it.
Now, the date you mentioned, Kerala started with early. Was a part of the tourism. Government has done. Great. About two great concepts. They have been marketing well to national collaboration, conferences on possible tourism. But still, why is something is successful? It's something you've given it to other. For society. But why we others and not other states regulate how I mean, where lies the problem? Why other states they are going to regulate not able to do that. A second question would be you mentioned about worsening the impacts of the business. I would love to know how to resolve those impacts. I don't know. The first question was, I think it's not to make it follow. We all want to follow successful models. That's the human tendency.
No, you see, I think I disagree with you. I think the reality is that most of us just want to carry on with business as usual. We don't want to go through the effort of making a change. And that's a really common human problem. We want to be able just to continue doing what we've always done. Now, Kerala has changed it because of a rebellion by the local community, ultimately. And the tourism industry understood that they couldn't continue to operate in the old way, that the community had to benefit from tourism if they were going to tolerate tourists coming to their villages. Now, because the tourism in Kerala was organized primarily around the villages, that was easier because villages are self-organized. Delhi, if you imagine trying to have a tourism revolt, a local people's revolt against tourism in Delhi, that would be incredibly difficult to organize. There have been some in particular areas. I think there's been one around Qutb Minar in the past. But it's much more difficult to do it at that kind of scale. Now, you ask why Kerala has not been emulated. But it has been emulated now because Madhya Pradesh has picked it up. I don't think that Kerala has been successful in getting an international reputation because it's run conferences. That's not the reason. The reason is that enough people have come to Kerala, had a great experience, and gone back and talked about it. That's how it gets into the New York Times. Nobody from the New York Times has ever been to Kerala to a conference. Its value experience, its experience for money in Kerala is very high. And tourists come back and talk about that, and that's what breeds success. And people also go back and say, well, I went to that tiger reserve. I didn't see a single tiger. There are too many people. I don't want to go there again. And they will tell other people, and that's disastrous. You know, that word of mouth, you were asking about how you make the change. Part of it is the word of mouth of people going back and talking about it and what you say to people. And I think the change can come fast. It's come fast in Kerala. It's unrecognizable. You know, they cancelled that last charter flight from the UK. It was 2009. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, those are the reasons why they've been leaders, but there hasn't been a local rebellion in Madhya Pradesh. They've simply understood that one of the ways of solving the problem of rural poverty in Madhya Pradesh is to enable the communities in rural areas to benefit from tourism. So they picked it up without the need for the local rebellion. Local rebellions have produced the incentive to make the change initially, and responsible tourism owes a lot to those rebellions. But actually now it's just picked up because it's a better form of tourism and it's more profitable. If you're running a hotel and the average guest stays one night, that means you've got to change all the sheets and clean the room every day. If they spend 2 nights, that reduces your linen cost. If they spend 3 nights, reduces it even more. So if you can extend the length of stay by having a richer set of experiences around your hotel, you make more money. It's as simple as that. Simple arithmetic. There's a lot of people getting very fidgety now. They clearly want their lunch. Thank you very much. I'll be back tomorrow. You want the same for presentation?
I'll take it on the other system. This is the local user. I think I'm.
Professor Goodwin, like every time, like every place, your address is always very impactful, very engaging. And you know, these youngsters, they don't have a habit of making notes like you and me, but they have got smart hard disk. Which probably,
Do they still pass their exams?
yeah, they still, and they have, the attention is very good for them. This is why I said, I wish I was born in this age and I wish I was a student of Amity. It was in my opening, because students are very smart and they know what to record and what to leave. So they know their points of memorizing, retention, they know it. But let me tell you one thing, young friends, you know, such sessions add a lot of value, not only to my learning, but also to my personality. My behavior change. When my behavior change, my personality, my outlook change. And whenever and wherever I travel is reflected. Is reflected. And this reflection should be apparent, should be evident. You know, my founder presidents always say that Amitians should come out to stand out. And people should easily identify, are you an Amitian? You know, because he believes, he firmly believes 82% of your personality is behavior. Only 18% is your academics. So that is why in Amity, a lot of emphasis is laid on such sessions by eminent personalities who have changed the world, who are moving the world, who are shaking the world. And Professor Goodwin is one of them. So we all should feel very happy, at least I feel very happy for each one of you, that you have the advantage, you have the mileage of having him among you. I posted his present on various social groups and a lot of compliments have come for Amity, for his presence. And they've asked me to share the link on YouTube. I shared there itself. Many of them have logged in. Look at that. You have the privilege of having him physically. People are dying hard to listen to him digitally. Difference lies in the vibes. The vibes which he shares with us when he's physically here. That positivity he shares with us when he's physically here. Catch those vibes. Feel those vibes. That's very important. And carry them wherever you go. This is how you can spread positivity. With these words, sir, I extend very sincere gratitude and look forward to your session for tomorrow. As usual, I have nothing to say but a big round of applause to you. Thank you. Sir. Goodwin, sir. Pen drive भी चाहिए इसको।
Post lunch.
Virtual from Thailand. In the beginning of a very important
अभी जस्ट 1-2 मिनट में
देखिए पोस्ट है यहाँ पे, ठीक है, जो भी आपको बोलना आपको प्रॉब्लम है जो भी, ठीक है,
बट इसका ये क्लिक नहीं किया तो
इससे नहीं आपको इस पे जाना ही नहीं।
अभी जो लोग शेयर करेंगे उनका हो जाएगा,
शेयर ही करना है ना आपको, शेयर के राइटिंग हम, ठीक है,
नहीं नहीं उनको शेयर करना है।
वो तो कर लेंगे, पीपीटी वगैरह उनके पास है,
हाँ, हाँ।
हाँ वो कर लेंगे, यहाँ पे दिखाई देगा सब, ठीक है, ये सब में कुछ नहीं करना है।
ओके, मुझे उनका दिखेगा कैसे कि मैं ज्वाइन किया जो वीडियो ऑन करेंगे या कुछ?
जब वो ऑन करेंगे, जब आप इनवाइट करेंगे, ऑन करेंगे आपको बता देंगे, मतलब जब आप इनवाइट करेंगे
ओके ओके,
तो पोस्ट जो है वो पिन कर देंगे,
ठीक है,
आपको इस पे कुछ नहीं करना।
ठीक है।
Registered हो या नहीं registered हो, उनको बना के आप बता देते हैं, मतलब बिल्डिंग
राइट, हाँ हाँ, इनको मैं पूछ रही हूँ कि ऑन करके इनको देखना है या जस्ट इधर बात नहीं कि डायरेक्टली इनवाइट करना है,
इनवाइट कर लेते हैं, फिर टाइम तो ऐसे ही हो गया,
हेलो
वो अपने ही चला रही है।
स्टार्ट करना हो।
हाँ एक बार चेक कर लो और ये पीपीटी चल रही है अभी
नहीं, खाली है।
इसको हटा देते हैं
Professor Ann, are you online?
फोन कनेक्टेड नहीं है भाई
नहीं वो बोले कि ऐसे ही हो जाएगा.
Hello, hi, I'm here. Okay,
Okay.
you unmute me now. I can talk now.
2 minutes
I
only.
can't talk, I can't answer you before, so I'm okay now. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, we are
All right.
going to start in just 1 minute only, okay?
Yeah, sure. Let me know when I can share my screen.
Okay, just within a 1 minute only, we are going to start.
Yeah, sure, no problem. Let me know. Okay.
ठीक है ना ठीक
Afternoon, everyone. Afternoon. Afternoon, Dr. Ann Ashton, and good afternoon, all the students. We are going to be starting with the second session for the day, which is part of the 2-day workshop. And I would like to introduce Dr. Ann Ashton. Associate Professor Ann Ashton graduated with a PhD and a master's degree from the University of Queensland, Australia. She's currently working as the Associate Dean for Administration, Research and Academic Services at the Graduation School of Tourism Management, National Institute of Development Administration in Bangkok, Thailand. She has experience working in the hotel industry for over 15 years. It is part of human resources, front office, and housekeeping, and spent the 2008-10 school years as a teaching assistant at the University of Queensland in Australia and universities in New Zealand. She is presently conducting research projects in the areas of wellness tourism destination development, including spiritual retreat and sound healing, active aging for wellness tourists, sports and leisure tourism development, yoga tourism, spiritual tourism development, slow food tourism, destination image development, street food tourism, and international retirement migration. So we're going to welcome Dr. Ashton for the session, which she's going to be talking about National Tourism Plan, Vision Without Action is a Daydream. Welcome.
Hi, everyone from Thailand, and thank you for the introduction. And first of all, I would like to thank you for inviting me to share something that significant and interesting again this year. And I remember that few years or last year, I was here as well. Hopefully I can be here by physically soon. Actually, I'm working a lot in India. I think I've been to many cities in India, but not physically. Hopefully I will be able to be there soon. So welcome everyone. As the introduction, my name is Anne. You can call me easy, Anne. Maybe I can share the slide now. May I please able to share my screen? Allow me to share my PowerPoint. Can you hear me perfectly from over there? Can you thumb up that you hear perfectly? Excellent. Thank you. Okay, thank you. I can share now. All right. Okay, as the theme of this year, I think that very interesting. And also I think I'm sharing something that I did my research project as about the wellness, so part of the talk today, I want to talk about the community-based tourism development and quality of life. Actions speak louder than words. Okay. First of all, I like to explain a little bit about the community-based tourism. I'm not sure that if you have ever heard about that, or some of you maybe already know about that. So what I will talk today, I would like to give you some case study where I have been, basically is it from my own experience. We have the community-based tourism, where I've been to many places. And after that, I will point out some of the impact of develop the community-based tourism and how can we manage that. And as I said, we need to take action and better than we just have in the plan. So this case study, it's come from one of my research project that I done recently last year, maybe initiative of the result that we can share together. And after I share some of that, and then I give you some result, and at the end of the session, I'm willing to answer any question if you may have, and then you can send into the chat box or the organizer. So let me introduce a little bit about the community-based tourism development. Is this the right action to improve community and resident quality of life? As you have heard the introduction about my expertise area, I am the organized many research relating to the wellness, including the adventure for wellness and spiritual tourism and mental well-being and work-life balance, also about health and well-being of food. So the community, this is part of the plan that many places in Thailand that we try to promote, and then we want to distribute the income, So what is a problem that we have? So, as at the moment, the trend and issue that we need to pay attention and consider to take action now is to improve tourism industry post-COVID-19. So how we gonna improve that? The community have suffered from the COVID-19, and many people who work in the city now, they move out from the city. And after 3 years on, the problem is that they don't want to come back. They want to move on with their new career and new life. So another organization that need to be urgently develop the skill and knowledge, perhaps it will be ongoing. So it's still many areas that need to be improved, but we also know that we have many plans, so how can we overcome about that? And another issue that I think we need to state urgently, about SDG, which is mean that Sustainable Development Goals, which develop as along with the sustainable. We're talking about poverty, reduce the poverty. We're talking about women and child equality. We talk about peace and justice, and others, environment, water saving, and things like that. Another thing that we're talking about the healthy food, as nowadays, I believe that many of us consider more about eating healthy food, and also the heavily talking about how can we produce our food and less chemical, So, and I just been to the conference yesterday or 2 days ago. We also have the foundation that try to reduce the chemical, especially rice field in Thailand. Another issue that we need, that we always talk about that, about aging society, as you may already know that the birth rate is reduced and dropping. And then we have a majority of baby boomer become more majority of the consumer in the next few years, perhaps 5 years. And also we're talking about, IT and smart tourism and all other plan that we need to develop, whether the IT that is we have many launch about the planning and giving knowledge, something like that as well. And the last one that as I found was the mental health well-being. This situation, it's perhaps it is come from nowadays we meet up with the crisis, and then we facing with many situations. So especially the young generation, perhaps generation Y and younger, they found that they have many problems with emotional and depression, and they have facing with the crises, and they don't know what to do, unlike the generation where Generation X on baby boomer, we born without IT, and we've been through the tough time. So, and this issue had been stated and had been launched about that. So how can we help those people to recover and understand and can move on with the life crisis? And coming down into the community-based tourism, where we have many people who live in the community, and how can we develop and how can we help them with the economics? First of all, I would like to give you some definition about the community. What does it mean? Actually, community development it can be defined as building active and sustainable communities is based on social justice and mutual respect. How about the community-based tourism? In Thailand, we have been developed this community-based tourism for a long time. I'll give you some example, and it's become more popular. The reason that we have to, we want to distribute the income. We want to bring up the community with the unique culture and traditions and other living and lifestyle. And because of the hunger for the tourists nowadays, they look for something that authentic. They're looking for something that slow life. Past few years, as you go back to have a look, you will heard about slow life tourism, and we're talking about the new experience where the people can get the hands on, where people can have something totally different. So that is why the community-based tourism is one of the national plan that we need to develop, and it will belong to the community, right? So the definition is about community-based tourism is tourism that is directly by the community, is managed by community for community, and has a role of ownership, the right to manage and provide knowledge for visitor, and to consider and sustainability of the environment, society, and the culture. So if some community that if we want to develop, but if the community disagree, and we are unable to do that. So this action had been launched for many years, and I'm sure that in some country around the world, especially in Southeast Asia, so we come up with something to build up from what the unique you have. So I give you the attitude of the people, or the resident. So the resident attitude toward community-based tourism is about the local community toward the perceive the impact is important as a crucial thing to consider, and how the positive and negative consequences impact their health well-being. And this is a very important. So we all consider about the health well-being, and where they have the tourists or the massive tourist number coming in, there of course that we have both positive and negative. And how can we take action about that? And how can we look after the people who live in that area, especially their health well-being and where they live? I give you some example. Maybe you have an idea about the CBT. Recently I visit in Sarawak, in Borneo, and they have some of the villages, with the unique, and I visit with the government, and we've been talking about, developing their village. So I visit there, and then, they're talking about how their develop their culture, pardon me, how they develop their community, because in Sarawak they have a different unique local and villager, and they have over 200 languages that they can use. So actually when we went there, you know, we go to see their culture, we go to see their traditional, how they eat and how they live in the old day. And this is kind of the community, and local community have the benefit from that. And what they sell is they bring up some history. You know, for example, like Sarawak, they used to have headhunter story, or the history that is so totally unique and different for the rest of the world, and that how the tourists want to go and have experience. There are some study about the impact of the community that found in 2016. Kerr and Jarrett Ottman said that the impact of community-based tourism on community development in Sarawak, you know, why they want to do that? The government take action with the local community. They want to empower local community to have a sense of belonging to the village or the region. They want to improve life standard of local community, preserve the environment, social and cultural sustainability, preserve and promote local culture, customs, and community lifestyle. And this is what how they want to improve that. Another one that I've been visit in Hoi An in the Vietnam. If many of you maybe visit there before. So what is good about Hoi An? The town is an exceptional, well-preserved example of a Southeast Asia, you know, trading port dating from the 15th to the 19th century. Its building and its street plan reflect the influence both indigenous and foreign that have combined to produce this unique heritage site. You know, in this place, it's when you visit there, it's giving a real Vietnamese and French all-day housing style. The French people used to live in this village, and some houses become the shop now, was built in 1920. For his tourism attraction, for this tourism attraction, it's good to see the government try to reserve the place and keep a great atmosphere, being authentic and bring back to the Vietnamese and French all-day lifestyle, including culture, value, and belief. So when you travel this area, you found that it's a very unique community. When you go to the other part of the Vietnam, they are totally local and they're totally unique, traditional and style. But when you came to Hoi An, it's the community that they form themselves, and they're totally different style. You see the building and things like that. And they have local lifestyle, you know, you can go by the boat, the decoration and everything like that. So the tourist attraction is become part of the local people in this area. I have opportunity to talk with the local pub, you know, said, as I said, they want to reserve about the old traditional style. They want to keep the building as it is because it's very authentic, and the tourists go there because we want to see something that original. However, I'm not sure that whether the message, this is part of the action plan. You have that action plan about reserve, and you want to show, you want to have the showcase of Hoi An as the old French style and then old building. However, when I went to the local pub and then I have a talk, you know, as a researcher, I always ask something about that. So I got some information there, you know, like a miscommunication, something about that. I asked that, how do you think about your community become a destination and become heritage, you know, and world class? Some of the owner, I was surprised, you know, I was surprised that the owner said, well, we want to do something we need. We want to build our building as we want to design. I want to make it into a more modern style. I want to change something, but you know, the government don't allow. So when I listen to that, and this is the action that maybe did not success. Why? Because the communication. So I asked them that, why do you think that way? Because, you know, local did not see the value. The local did not did not see that why the tourists are going there. If we want to see the new modern pub or the restaurant, we can find in anywhere, in Thailand, in India, in Australia, or in anywhere we see the new modern pub. But when we go there, we go to see something authentic that we cannot find anywhere around the world. But this development, as the government tried to give that some communication, I think, need to pass on into the owner, and understand that the owner are very young. They think that they cater for local, because the people who live there sometimes they see something like that, they think that's normal. So it talking about like destination image from common unique into extremely uniqueness. So the common unique that perhaps local can see that, or for us is common, is not thing significant, but the message that we give to them. And this is how they can survive, So if you want local have the income, if you want to keep the tourist number coming in, the most important thing is the communication between the government and the stakeholders. So another place that I think that is in Thailand, we have many community-based tourism in Thailand, and some of them. I have someone mute the microphone, sorry. Yeah, the community-based tourism in Thailand, many places been successful, and some of them had been over tourism. And this is the point that we are starting to lose the vision and the aim of develop this one. So one of the community that very famous and world sustainable city, they call Chiang Khan or LiFE. LiFE is the province that located in northeast of Thailand, as you can see from this map, and then you can see from this map. Chiang Khan is one of the name of the sub-region where they locate near Laos, border of Laos. And we developed this place because the uniqueness of the location, and also is the town on the Mekong River. The unique style is a slow life tourism, local lifestyle, and authenticity and culture tourism, and the town, the houses is made from teak wood town. And most important thing that the influence of the people on this side, they have similar to the people in Laos. And even, the food they eat, which is in the morning, people can go and can enjoy the local lifestyle. For example, like the food I'm showing you here. This kind of morning breakfast, it will be different from normal Thai breakfast. Or they have some, building, and the people going there, go to offering food for the monk. And in the slow life, in the morning, people go across the border to go for do some fishing and, go boating and something like that. They're very popular in Thailand. And another unique of this town is because they are close to the many hiking or the mountain. The people come to stay here one night, and then the next day they go into the national park for hiking. And then after they come back from hiking, they will come to this town to have a rest, So, and this is one of my case study that I'm doing for my research about quality life of the people in the community-based tourism. Another community-based tourism that very successful. This village was built now, I think it's over 20 years ago. It's up north of Thailand. It's called Mae Kampong or San Kampang in Chiang Mai, north of Thailand. So as you see in the red circle here, this place is become one of the example that Thailand, the people in Thailand try to improve their community and turn their community to be a tourist destination. And this place was very successful at the first time. And even now, it's still successful. So they have the village that hidden in the mountain, but they are not so far from the city center. It perhaps maybe take about 45 minutes to 1 hour. Why that's unique? Because the slow life living and the environment, and they have the water flow, they have the local lifestyle of northern food. So as you can see, you know, that here, the houses is still live in like in the old day, they call the northern Lana style. And as you can see on the right picture here, they have the steam, you know, like the water that flowing from the water flow. So this village was built in 1900. So the first farmer was moved in the area nearby, you know, and then they have like farming. And this area is the one to keep as ecotourism, slow life tourism, cultural tourism, and northern Thai local lifestyle. And there are some of the food which is very unique. Where many people are going here, you have to try this kind of food. You know, they have some curry. As you can see, the very unique a tray, you know, the tray that they make by teak or wood. And then when we eat in the old day, we will serve with the tray like that, which is is a symbol of this region. So many people going there because they just want to experience that. So the village was successful, and the local people turned their house into homestay, and many people who have their own house there, that turn the house into the shop and the restaurant. But when they become popular, okay, when they become popular, they knew that they will have a lot of tourists come, especially in the time of holiday time or the long weekend. But due to the road to get into the village is quite small, because they are in the mountain, they are in like a valley. Due to the high season, they create a massive traffic, and they have some accident, you know, they have something like that. So instead of, you know, helping people to have a safe and enjoy life, but in the high season time, it become a massive and over tourism. And this kind of thing that I think we need to take action. We need to understand over tourism is not good. It's good that we can develop the destination and use success. But if we have over tourism, do they have the plan for that? And there is a talk about that. But sometimes, you know, the action is not quite there yet. So be mindful that if you're gonna build the destination, you need to consider about whether are over tourism or not, you know. So we need to consider about how to get an access to the place. This place is wonderful and marvelous, but one or two specific problem is that the road to get there and access, and then the management. But in terms of management, you know, we see the plan, but in action, as a tourist, as a researcher, you know, I can see that we need to starting to do something about the traffic when we have a high season time. Another thing that, you know, we always said about, we need to keep our authentic way. We need to keep our lifestyle. You know, the people need to wear a local dressing, something like that, to keep the tourists to come, and that as a plan, and that is the vision of the village. However, there are some part that when I went there and I have seen some of the some of the local restaurant and business, some of them is just starting to turn like in Bangkok. And when I get there, I said, it's not different. The way they serve, you know, the way they talk, the way they wear the costume, it's slightly changed. And the native speaking, they are not there, you know. So the reason that, you know, our plan that we want to talk, we talk about, we want local have the income. We want local work in their hometown, don't go to the big city. However, when it's starting to have ship from local own the place, they sold the business, and the people from outside are coming in, and then they start to carry on with their business. And then they slightly to change the theme, and then slightly to change the authentic way. And this is the action plan we need to urgent and then state about that. So however, they are slowly doing that. Another place that I want to point out, they call the floating market. If many of you maybe come to Thailand, you know, maybe you can see our destination floating market. We have very popular in the old day. Why? Because it's the people are really live on the boat, you know, like transportation. The people are used boat to go in and out from the city. However, this is some unique food because I live near the sea, and there's a place for produce some local food, handmade and seafood. However, there are some plans that had happened in the area that this is, I think the problem had been solved and compromised in terms of the building here. My for that, you said the action plan is we want to build community-based tourism and we want to sustain the environment. We want to keep local authentic and we want to keep them happy with the local lifestyle. However, when they start become tourist destination and become famous, the investor try to give the comfort or try to give the facility to respond to the high demand of the tourists. Somehow, the big high-rise buildings starting to build. And you imagine about, you have local village and the people use boat for transportation. Suddenly you have the big building built on, on the near the place. So this is a case that it had happened, and local try to protest about that and complain about that. So I think eventually they have some solution. So this kind of thing that is can, like I said, you have a wonderful plan. However, how can those things happen and that is not go according to the first aim of the destination? So that reason on the CBT and the impact, if you talk about you want to increase the income, you want to help the people, you want to help the local, perhaps the beginning you maybe have to think about whether the people around there that can get the income or not. So this is just example because I'm talking about product life cycle in the destination. When you're talking about new villages that they built into the tourism, the time of investment and the time to gain those benefits, it might take time. You used to have low income and the beginning of the village is maybe slowly go. And how can you maintain that? How can you manage that? The local people understand about how to manage about the destination. This is the introduction in the introduction state. So, and many places, and for example, another one is in Cambodia, this is the impact, a study about the impact of the community-based tourism. So what is a positive impact? So CBT positive impact, for example, you can create a more sustainable tourism, industry if managed properly, social life, organization, local empowerment, and be own leader to drive the CBT, understanding between stakeholders, because the working collaboration with a non and profit organization, the pride and the sense, for example, like I said, if you represent something about your culture and about way of life, and the people are enjoying that, and the people are learn about your culture, and you're proud, the CBT create the proud and the sense of belonging. Of course, the economic diversification, earning income, local not intend to move out from the city. Social diversity, learning and adapting. However, there are the negative impact that had happened. And this is when we're talking about how can we prevent or how can we avoid that? Of course, we can avoid the negative impact totally, but do we have that action plan to solve those problems or not? So this is just a case study from, for example, we're talking about environment destroy from some development, for example, like building infrastructure and road access. But if you want to keep the road being like authentic way, how can you manage about tourists who go into your destination? Sociocultural negative impact, for example, new way of local living had changed. The culture is just as instead of wearing traditional costume in daily life, but rather than they use a modern costume, maybe look at the behavior of the tourists. When they go to the destination, they spend money a lot going out and drink and drunk, and then you go to the restaurant every night. Locals seeing that tend to be maybe want to do the same thing, but those tourists sometimes when they stay at home, they perhaps did not spend something like that. So this kind of influence maybe affect the people at local want to have expense. Economic cost living is high. So, you know, when we have a destination turn into the tourists, always suffer to local. Because why? When the tourists going there, maybe many of you might have that experience as well. You go to the tourist area, when you buy something, you can see the price is increasing. And when local go to buy the same price, that is when the suffer of the local. And how can we control this? And this is still big issue. And I think that it need to be solved, that problems when it happen. The negative impact on local livelihood, for example, community relationships. So this one come from a study. Community relationship with the temple, for example, you know, in the old day, this is only the Cambodian New Year, the people go to the of their religion or their belief. But, you know, when they turn into community and tourism, things become more commercial, things become more business, and the friendliness between the neighbor or, you know, to see the people in the village are less and less, and they live there on their own, and the people become selfish. And the growth of tourism in the community is create concern project stakeholders, especially like loss of land and loss of control of the over development sometimes. So here is some of a study that I've conduct with my PhD student, and then now it's final state of writing the paper. We just want to propose that this is very important, that we need the government to really look at and take action immediately. When you open the tourism, when you open your community to be a tourism, you need to think about the quality of life. And here are the concepts, you know, you're talking about material well-being, you're talking about the income, you know, employment and the cost living, or you're talking about health, safety, well-being, and perhaps the people who are living there, you know, they maybe get affected by the tourists, you know, bring the disease, or you have drug, or you have people from outside come, you have thief, you have criminal, and you have petty crime or something like that as well. The well-being community. And then you're talking about emotional well-being. And this one, it's very important. I think it's more important than physically, in my opinion, according to my research. What does it mean by emotional well-being? And the people have seen, you know, something happen. And then when they have perhaps the quality of life, for example, you have more tourists coming all the time. The time for you to have your own life, sometimes maybe it might be limited. And it make it happen between the people who turn themselves into the service provider, or some of them did not turn themselves into the tourism. They live in that village, and then they work outside, and then they come home, they want to have a rest. You know, this kind of thing that had happened. So according to my research, one of my study that I study at Chiang Khan, you know, the one that near Laos border, there are two groups of the people who have been affected by the development of the tourists. The group who turn themselves to turn their house, to open their restaurant, and to do anything about tourists. They're happy when the tourists come, you know, they don't, they enjoy with the tourists who come there because they have income. One of my participants, I interviewed them, they talk about, we invest that before the COVID coming, and we invest several million baht, you know, perhaps it's about, let's say maybe 50 or to 100,000 US dollars. And suddenly the COVID-19 come, and they have been suffer, you know, so they have to pay the bank. They say, we need the tourists to come in. But on the other hand, you know, we don't want to open the village because local who live in there, who don't have the business, they don't want the tourists to come because they don't want the disease to come. You know, when the COVID-19 come for the first time, everyone's so scared, right? We don't know what is coming. And everyone tried to still shocked about that situation. So this kind of thing that it had happened, and how can we solve that? How can we make them understand, and how can they make them have a good quality of life? Because the as we, propose this development, you want them to have a better quality of life, but somehow, are they really have a good quality of life? So this kind of thing that perhaps we need to look at about that. So here are some of the domain about the quality of life, the relationship with the family, and emotional well-being, as I mentioned before. And oops, sorry, we will answer the question later. And emotional well-being, and about health, work and productivity, material well-being, feeling part of one local community, and personal safety and quality of the environment. So this is our theory foundation that we need to bring it and consider. How can we balance that? How can we make them happy as well as they have good health well-being? And nowadays, as I have experienced, I've been to different places around Southeast Asia, especially, and even in Australia. I just returned back from Australia. It's still, the imbalance between the development, and some places it's overused, some places it's still under, and the people, the other day I talked with one of the villager. They're talking about they have developed their product. They use local wisdom, food, or they bring their own from the farm, and then they don't know where to sell because they don't have the tourists come in there, or some places they're over tourism and they don't have enough supplier. So this thing is become always, over or under. So this is one of the theory foundation. We need to take action and consider of the balance if you want them to have, good quality of life. This is another finding of the recent research that I conducted. CBT and resident quality of life model. We're talking about the resident attitude towards CBT. Another part that we found, they're feeling happy, they're proud to be part of the community, they gain new experience from the tourists. One of the people said, their career is a farmer. They have rice field, but they said, we are more enjoy with the tourists to come there. And that is good, so you achieve the aim. And in terms of the product life cycle that I'm talking before, in the early state, maybe introduction, you're starting to build it up, one day are mature and then they are decline. They will have like a PLC, product life cycle. How can you prepare about that? And this is what I asked for. You should have the plan. Of course, you have a good plan to develop that. You will success. And how about if you have problem over tourism, or if your destination is starting to decline? Those people who live in there, how can they survive? How you action about the problems that when they have, So in many places you success, and over success mean that the people are decline. Why they decline? So one of the northern part that I tell you, they decline because of the change of the authentic way of life, and they shift from authentic local northern style into similar destination as in Bangkok. And that product life cycle of development are shipped and are changed. And then what will happen later on? We need to take action about that. So here of some of the outcome, the introduction state and growth stage and maturity and decline state. The quality of life, you're talking about material well-being. It's mean you're talking about, of course, you have income, community well-being. You become, when you have community tourism there, the people used to be very kind, used to be, giving friendship to each other. You used to give and take, you to offer things. But when the next door, this is one of the problem we found, when the next door opened the house into the homestay, and the space for parking become problems. And then it happened between the people who have, their own house as well. They want to keep their space for their client. And that this kind of thing, it turned up that the neighbor become enemy. How can we make them well-being? The emotional well-being, like I said before, need to control about the satisfaction. So emotional mean that wherever you be, you are satisfied with the place where you are doing now. And how can we have solve the problem. Health and safety, of course, you need to be safe. You used to be able to open your door, and after you have tourists, you need to be leave the tight. You need to lock every door, So this kind of thing, maybe perhaps we need to be considered, and we need to make a balance about that. So I think that how to action. Actually, the action plan we have, and we know that we're gonna do, but once we have those issues, how can we do that? And we have to take that immediately. So the economic, community, local, supply, business owner, by the local, the income, and then socio-cultural, you promote your destination, and how can you keep that sustained? And if they, if something happened, do they have anyone in charge? But this is still a gap that I found. Environment sustainable, of course, there's some part of that, you have that plan not to chop the tree, or not to destroy, or destroy as less as they can. For example, if you have to build a road go into the village. Quality of life improvement, is it really improved? Any assets about that? Are you working collaboration together, and one of another, they are support each other? The benefit for local is the most important thing. Are they really? So basically, from being my point of view as a researcher, I found sometimes it's benefit not really at the beginning they go to the local, but when they become a world-class destination, or they become a tourist attraction, they will have a slightly change, and that is a plan. We need to take action urgently. So what I will conclude that, let our actions speak louder than our word. It means that if we have the vision and mission to develop destination, but somehow that we need to speak out, and we need to take action, rather than you just have the planning and policy in there, and then you just keep dream about that, So yeah, that is finished the conclusion of my talk today. So if you have any question, please feel free to ask. Thank you so much.
Thank you, ma'am. Any questions?
I
Students?
think I see one of the questions here. Chat box here. Okay. Can we consider community-based ecotourism model as a framework for subsistence market, leading toward more sustainable community? Yeah, of course we can. I think the strategy management of the CBT, it can be applied into a different type of tourism. CBT, they have different type of the CBT. Okay, CBT, maybe you focus on the culture, perhaps. And CBT, you maybe use the local lifestyle, or maybe you use at the environment. For example, we have the CBT in southern part of Thailand, and the unique of the destination is just you going out and spend your life like a fisherman. You're going out to do fishing, or you go to catch the seafood, So, or the ecotourism is some places that you may be focused as a destination for ecotourism, because the destination is suitable. And one of my students doing a research about Panda National Park, and they're talking about ecotourism, and the people open the destination for the tourists, but use a theme as ecotourism, because the government, come and take over. You cannot destroy anything in that national park, and anything in that national park.
Anybody? And
Yeah, thank Thanks for the question. That's a very good question.
निकलेगा नहीं निकलता नहीं नहीं वो निकलता नहीं
Yes, sure. Yes, sure. I can give you my work email.
Come. Come this side. Come this side.
You can contact me anytime. Then my email on the screen now at work email.
Very good afternoon, ma'am. This is Oina Magasi from MTTM2. And my question is, how can responsible tourism improve the life of local people? I want to know how responsible tourism and sustainable tourism can improve the life of a local people.
Okay, that's a very good question. I think actually the CBT perhaps will be one part of the SDG, the Sustainable Development Goal. How can we reduce the poverty and how can we, be sustained? So when we we're talking about the development, when we open the community-based tourism, we need to consider about how can we saving environment and how can we help with the economic of the local. And for example, people always go out into the city to work. But when they have developed that destination, the people don't go to work outside anymore because their income just right in front of their house. So like I said, if we have the good action plan, if we have the good plan and if we action properly, of course, that will help to the local be sustained. Yeah. Thank you for the question. Thank you for the question.
Okay, ma'am, my question is like when we talk about, general tourism, we see money leakage is the biggest issue, right? Money leakage is the biggest issue. But when we talk about community-based tourism, we try to intend that all of the benefits should go to the local community. But most of the time, the head of the village, even they are, just taking all of the benefit and they're not giving it to the other people who are participating in tourism. How basically we can focus more on it and we can take whole community as a, interior part and then further they all can share the same benefit.
Yeah, thank you for the question. I think this question I have facing by myself, and I think I'm very happy to share. At one of the village that I say from the north, they are very original of the CBT. It had happened one day that the leadership hold everything as, he hold everything into his power. Even when you're booking something, at the early stage, yeah, he organized everything equally. However, when they're starting to talk about, I give you one example. When they're talking about the homestay, all the villagers, open their house into the homestay and then they get about $20 per night, and then suddenly some bright idea, open their house, not take the house into the part of the homestay alliance. They just, okay, we don't want to open our homestay anymore. We want a whole house and then we can give them to stay like hotel. And then they charge about maybe $250 a night instead of you get $20 a night, right? And this is exactly what happened. So this is what I said, that we need to take action. How can we prevent that? Firstly, we need to get the good leadership. From my analysis, that you need to get, they call ethics leadership. Ethic leadership means that you need to stay there, or the authentic leadership. So you need to get the leadership who think about the village. And after that happened, the village divide into two groups. The group who get the benefit and the group who did not get the benefit. So when I go there, I talk, I ask the living about the, because when we come here, in the high season, and then we have the traffic jam, even more than in Bangkok, but the first important thing that how we solve that, from my own experience and my final analysis, firstly, you need to get the vision of the leadership right. They think that, oh, I'm so proud of that, I'm success, I don't care. But the answer to me that if you don't come, I don't care. And it changed. If they start 20 years ago, they maybe never said like that, right? How to solve this? Firstly, leadership is the most important one. The leadership have to be stay with the vision, and you think about how can local can earn that income, But you know, in some place, another one that is a good one. I pointed out some point. I want you to see the point. Another one that down south of Thailand, they have a good leadership, and this guy, he actually well educated, and if anything come in with the, you know, some business and something like that, he just refused. He did not go along with it, and he won't go for only for the money, and he go for the benefit. So to be successful, to be able to take action and successfully, the leadership local, I talk about local, all right? Local leadership is very important. And also that, you know, the sharing benefit. Another place that I went, one of them welcome me very good, you know, you're talking and oh, you come, and we go to another place, they just want to shut the door in front of you. They say because they don't have that benefit, and that is the main thing that we need to do is the leadership. Yeah. Thank you for the question.
Thank you so much. Any other student have any question? Please raise your hand. Okay, I would
Maybe you
like,
can share. Yeah, maybe you can share some. If you have in India, you have something like that. You have community-based tourism in India too, right?
sorry, ma'am.
Do you have similar like that community-based tourism in India?
Yeah, we are focusing more on community-based tourism in India, and in many places, even we are successfully, you know, done it. So right now we can say we are in the process. It is not fully achieved, but yes, we are in a process. And in many places, even in Himachal Pradesh and in Northeast, where we are implementing this model, and government is working hard, even the local community, they are also supporting in this matter.
That's excellent. That's excellent. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Professor Anne, for accepting our invitation and coming over here.
Thank
And now I would like to invite Dr. Suki for the formal vote of thanks. Thank you so much.
On behalf of the management of Amity University, Noida, our Dean, Faculty of Hospitality and Tourism, Dr. Sajnani, all the faculty members and the students, I extend word of thanks to Dr. Ann Ashton, who delivered a wonderful speech on community-based tourism. Thailand has been at the forefront of pioneering concepts of tourism. In fact, some of the best practices in any form of tourism, you know, even if it is service of the food, even if it's, you know, tourism at the community level, at the grassroots level, Thailand has to inspire the world. And we in India are also taking steps towards all those niche tourisms. And we also have started, you know, best practices in these kind of tourisms. For example, tourists in India, in Himachal, they have got this, they stay in apple orchards. They not only are part of the families, they are also part of the orchard. They stay in the orchards. So, I mean, so these are the baby steps, you know, which we are also taking towards community-based tourism. One more thing, that India is a country diverse with so many cultures and so many languages, so many religions. And I'm sure that once we take a strong hold of community-based tourism, India is going to be one of the important international destinations for community-based tourism, because India is a large country and so many cultures are there. You know, culture keeps on changing after every 20-30 kilometers. Everything changes in India. So that is a strong point when it comes to community-based of tourism. Anyway, I extend warm welcome to your wonderful presentation. I enjoyed your slides, especially your innovative way of presenting the models of the community-based tourism rather than too much of text and theory. What many researchers around the world have presented, how they have presented the concept they have presented. It was a very memorable experience. We learned a lot of things from your presentation, and I'm sure that we'll take a step ahead from where you have left, and we hope to see you again in near future, Dr. N, and maybe sometime here in campus in person. I thank all the students who have been extremely patient during the workshop, who have been noting all the small points, and I'm sure that they will keep learning. They will write further assignments, reports, dissertations based on community-based tourism, guided by the respective faculty members. Thank you very much, Dr. N, once again, and hope to see you again. Bye-bye. Have a great day.
Thank you very much for inviting me, and hopefully I can be there in physically. And thank you so much for giving me a part of the important conference. Namaste.
Thank you, ma'am.
See you sometime. Bye bye.
ठीक है कल कितने बजे मैम ओके मैम हाँ हाँ कोई नहीं कल आप ले आए कल का टेंशन नहीं सर आज का टेंशन था हमारे लिए तो हम हेलो हाँ हाँ कंप्लीट हाँ बन गया